I had almost finished stacking my dishes after dinner when my landlady's voice stopped me. "Why don't you sit for a while?" she said, her tone light but carrying something beneath it. Beside her, her friend gave a quiet smile, the kind that lingers as if it holds a secret. I hesitated for a second. Normally I would retreat to my room after eating, but there was something in the way they looked at me that made me pause. The living room was dimly lit, just a single candle glowing on the table between us, its soft vanilla scent curling into the air. I sat back down, aware of the quiet ticking of the wall clock and the faint hum of crickets through the open window. It wasn't uncomfortable silence. It felt deliberate, as though they had waited for this moment. My landlady, a woman in her early 40s, carried herself with the kind of grace that didn't demand attention but naturally held it. She wore a simple dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. As she brushed a strand away from her face, I noticed her hand trembling just slightly before she folded it neatly on her lap. Her friend, maybe the same age but with a different presence, leaned in with her elbow propped against the armrest, chin resting in her palm. She studied me with an expression I couldn't quite read, part amusement, part tenderness. Her smile didn't falter, but her eyes carried something softer, almost as if she was testing how much I could handle without words. The clink of teacups filled the pause when she poured hot tea into 3 small cups, sliding one across the table toward me. The porcelain felt warm against my palms, anchoring me in that moment. I noticed how their voices lowered as they spoke. Not secretive, but intimate. Their words weren't yet heavy with meaning, yet the quiet between them seemed to say more than what was spoken aloud. I felt their eyes on me more than once. Not the casual glance of polite conversation, but something deeper, searching. The landlady's gaze would linger and then fall away quickly, as if afraid to be caught. Her friend, on the other hand, looked at me with ease, as though she wanted me to notice. The room grew smaller with each passing minute, not in size but in closeness. The candles flicker through gentle shadows across their faces, softening their features, giving the night an almost cinematic stillness. I became aware of my own breathing, of the way my pulse quickened even though nothing dramatic had happened yet. It was in the subtle things, the way her fingers traced the rim of her cup, the way her friend's foot brushed lightly against mine under the table. Whether by accident or intention, I couldn't tell. All I knew was that the night had shifted. They had asked me to stay, and though I didn't yet know why, I could feel it already. Whatever they wanted to share wasn't small. The tea had cooled a little by the time conversation began to flow. It wasn't the usual small talk about errands or weather, the kind I was used to sharing with them. Tonight, their voices carried something different, softer, more thoughtful. My landlady spoke first. She told me about her workday, but in the middle of her story, she paused, her fingers circling the rim of her cup again and again. It was a nervous habit, I realized. She was buying time, searching for the right words. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "this house feels too quiet when everyone has gone." She gave a small laugh after, like she was brushing it away, but her eyes didn't follow the smile. Her friend shifted closer, her expression gentler now, her earlier playful air slipping into something more protective. She reached out and placed her hand on my landlady's knee, a small gesture, but one that stilled the restless movement of her fingers. "You don't have to say it like it's nothing," she murmured. The weight of that moment settled over the 3 of us. I realized I had never seen either of them so unguarded. Usually, they carried themselves with a kind of certainty, as though age had given them armor. But tonight, that armor had cracks, and through them I glimpsed something fragile. I felt the urge to respond, though I wasn't sure what words could fit. So instead, I simply nodded, letting them know I heard them. My silence wasn't distance, it was presence. Her friend's gaze shifted to me then. She leaned forward, resting her chin back in her palm. But this time her eyes didn't carry amusement. They carried something heavier. "Do you ever feel like you're living a little too fast?" she asked. Like one day you'll look up and wonder where the years went? The question startled me, not because it was strange, but because it was so familiar. I thought about late nights spent working, the way days blurred together at my age, always rushing toward some future goal. I swallowed and admitted softly, all the time. I think about it more than I probably should. Her lips curved into a faint smile, but her eyes softened, almost like she was relieved by my answer. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine as she passed me the sugar bowl I didn't ask for. The touch was brief, but deliberate enough that I felt it linger long after. The room seemed to fall into a rhythm. The tick of the clock, the faint clatter of teacups, the way their voices dipped and rose, drawing me deeper. The house no longer felt like walls and furniture. It felt like a circle of trust slowly being drawn around me. When my landlady finally exhaled and leaned back, her shoulders seemed lighter, as though saying even a little had freed her. Her friend squeezed her knee once more, then withdrew her hand, her gaze flicking between us both. I didn't yet know what else they wanted to share, but the air had shifted again. This wasn't small talk anymore. This was the beginning of something honest, and I was already a part of it. The clock ticked on in the corner, but time felt suspended in that dim living room. Our conversation had settled into a deeper rhythm, and I sensed it was leading somewhere neither of them had said aloud yet. My landlady shifted in her seat, smoothing her dress as though preparing herself. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed a hint of uncertainty. You know, she began, sometimes I wonder if you feel out of place with us, with me, with her. Her hand gestured lightly toward her friend, then dropped back into her lap. Her friend tilted her head, curious but quiet, as though letting her speak first. I felt the question hang in the air. It was the kind of question that carried weight far beyond the words, an acknowledgement of something delicate. Cleared my throat. You mean because of... I hesitated, then said it plainly, the years between us? She nodded, her fingers fidgeting briefly with the hem of her sleeve. It's hard not to notice. Her friend reached over at that moment, her hand resting lightly on my landlady's shoulder. The simple gesture silenced her doubt for a second. Then her friend turned to me, eyes warm but probing. Do you? She asked softly. Do you feel out of place with us? I looked between them, two women in their 40s, carrying themselves with a kind of grace that felt different from the people my own age. I should have felt younger, smaller somehow, but that wasn't what filled me. What I felt was steadiness. I'd be lying if I said I never thought about it, I admitted. My voice was quiet, but certain. But it doesn't make me feel out of place. If anything, it makes me pay more attention. There's something about the way you both carry yourselves. I don't see you as older. I just see... I trailed off, realizing my words were dangerously close to slipping into confession. They both watched me closely, and I could see the flicker of something soften in my landlady's face. Her hand, which had been wringing her sleeve, stilled. Her friend leaned back slightly, her smile faint but genuine. That's a kind answer, she said, her tone half teasing, half sincere. But maybe it's more than kindness. Her words sent a ripple of heat through me. I couldn't look away from her gaze, steady and knowing, as if she had seen right through the hesitation I'd tried to mask. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was charged. My heartbeat felt louder than the clock, louder than the crickets outside. The age gap was no longer the unspoken elephant in the room. It was acknowledged, laid bare, and yet it hadn't pushed me away. If anything, the space between us seemed smaller now, filled with something unnamed but undeniable. They had opened the door to vulnerability, and without meaning to, I had stepped through it. After the weight of what had just been said, the room didn't return to its old rhythm. Something had shifted. It wasn't just the candlelight or the deepening quiet of the evening. It was the space between us, smaller now, as though the air itself had pulled us closer together. My landlady rose from her chair with a slow, thoughtful grace, as if considering whether to end the night. Instead, she crossed the room and sat beside me on the couch. The cushions dipped beneath her weight, bringing her nearer than she'd ever chosen to be before. Her sleeve brushed against mine, a barely there touch that sent a quiet rush through me. Her perfume was faint, floral, something that lingered softly in the air each time she shifted. I caught myself holding my breath, not wanting to break the moment. Her friend remained across from us for a time, her eyes sharp but gentle, watching the closeness unfold. Then she leaned forward, reaching for the small plate of fruit she'd brought earlier. Without a word, she held out a piece to me. When I reached for it, her fingers lingered against my palm. Deliberate this time, not accidental. The fruit was cool, but her touch burned warmer than the tea I still held. I glanced between them, uncertain if either would acknowledge what had just happened. But they didn't. Instead, conversation continued, lighter now, meandering like a stream. The friend told a small story about her childhood. My landlady laughed softly at a detail, and I added something of my own. Yet all the while, the pauses grew longer, the silences more comfortable, the air charged with something unspoken. At one point, my landlady leaned just slightly toward me, her arm brushing mine again. The contact was casual enough to be innocent, yet the warmth of her body so close left me hyper-aware of every small movement. She didn't pull away. Her friend rested back in her chair, one knee tucked under her, her posture relaxed. She wasn't smiling playfully anymore. Her expression was softer, steadier, like she was taking in the scene as something natural, something that didn't need words. The candle flickered, shadows shifting across the walls. Time seemed to slow, each second heavy with meaning. I could feel my heartbeat in my fingertips, in my throat, even in the silence. There were no grand declarations, no sudden confessions. Just small things, the brush of fabric, the warmth of a hand against mine, the way their eyes lingered when they thought I wasn't looking. These were the threads weaving the moment tighter. By the time the clock chimed the next hour, I knew with certainty. Something had changed. None of us had named it yet, but the closeness was real, undeniable. And it wasn't going to fade when the night ended. The night had grown quieter, the hum of the crickets outside almost the only sound. Conversation drifted into softer places, the kind of talks that don't come easily in the daylight. It was my landlady who broke the fragile silence first. "I didn't think I'd say this," she whispered, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "But sometimes I feel invisible, as if the years have moved faster than I could keep up. People see me as steady, reliable, but rarely as a woman." Her eyes dropped, her voice trailing, as if she feared she had said too much. Her friend immediately leaned toward her, her hand finding hers, steady and sure. "You are seen," she said softly, almost fiercely. "Don't ever think otherwise." The touch was small, but the way their hands clung to each other carried years of shared trust. I felt something twist in my chest, watching the honesty unfold. It wasn't pity, it was something heavier, more protective. I had never seen her so open before, never seen her let the world beneath her composure show. Her friend turned then, her expression shifting from reassurance to her own confession. "And me?" she said, her voice laced with a faint laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "I've always been afraid of being misunderstood. People think I'm bold, carefree. They don't see that sometimes it's just a way of hiding the fear that if I show too much of myself, I'll be judged for it." The laugh faded, replaced by a long breath. She looked at me then, her gaze direct and searching, as if wondering whether I would see past her surface. Words didn't come quickly to me. I wasn't sure I had the right ones, but I knew silence would feel like distance. So, without thinking too hard, I leaned forward and rested my hand gently over hers. Her skin was warm, her fingers trembling just slightly beneath mine. "I don't judge you," I said quietly. "I think you've both shown me more honesty tonight than most people dare to share in a lifetime." The room stilled. My landlady looked at our hands, then at me, and something in her eyes softened further. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition. Her friend gave the faintest smile, but it wasn't her usual playful one. It was tender, almost fragile. She didn't move her hand away. The candle burned lower, its glow painting all of us in flickering warmth. The air was charged but not heavy. It felt like a circle had closed around us. 3 people sharing pieces of themselves that had been hidden too long. I realized then how delicate this bond was, how carefully it had been built in whispers and pauses, in brushes of touch and unguarded looks. And yet it felt unbreakable. The candle had burned low, its flame swaying gently, painting the room in soft, uneven light. The clock ticked on, steady and patient, but none of us moved to end the night. It felt as though we had crossed into a place where time no longer pressed against us, where everything existed in this quiet moment, held delicately between 3 people. My hand still rested lightly on her friend's, though neither of us had spoken since. The stillness of her skin beneath mine was steady now, the tremble gone, as if my touch had quieted something restless inside her. My landlady sat close on my other side, her knee brushing mine each time she shifted, her presence both grounding and fragile. She reached out then, slowly, as though testing her courage, and laid her hand on top of mine. Her fingers were soft, tentative, but her thumb brushed gently across my skin in a small, steady rhythm. That single motion sent a current through me more powerful than words. I didn't speak. None of us did. Words would have felt too blunt for what was happening. Instead, I sat caught between their warmth, her hand beneath mine, her hand over mine. 2 women who, in their own ways, had chosen to trust me with pieces of themselves they rarely revealed. Her friend leaned back into the armrest, tilting slightly so her shoulder brushed against me. It was such a simple touch, but it lingered weightless and sure, as though she wanted me to know she was there, not as a guest in the moment but as part of it. The silence was full, not empty, not awkward, full of everything that hadn't been said. I could feel their eyes on me in turns, glances that landed and lingered, soft and searching. When I met them, I didn't look away. I let the silence carry the answer. Yes, I felt it too. The flame flickered lower, shadows sliding across their faces. My landlady's expression was softer than I had ever seen it, her strength tempered by a kind of openness I hadn't expected. Her friend's gaze was warmer, steady, as if she was daring me to name aloud what we all already knew. But no one spoke, and somehow that was better. The stillness said it all, that the distance between us had closed, that the questions of age, of difference, of judgment had been set aside. In their place was a quiet recognition. We didn't define it. We didn't need to. The unspoken bond was enough. The house felt different now, alive in its quiet. The walls that had once felt ordinary seemed to lean closer, holding the secret of what had passed between us. I knew when I left the room later, I would carry this silence with me. It wasn't emptiness, it was a promise. The night had stretched longer than I expected, yet none of us seemed eager to break it. The candle was nothing but a pool of wax now, its flame small and flickering, and the air carried that faint vanilla warmth, softer than before. Still, no one moved to blow it out. My landlady's hand, which had rested on mine, gave the faintest squeeze before she slowly withdrew it. Not abruptly, not with distance, just enough to let the moment ease, like a soft exhale. She glanced at me then, her eyes holding mine with something unspoken. Gratitude, maybe, or a quiet recognition of what had just passed between us. Her friend stood first, stretching lightly before reaching for her coat. But instead of leaving right away, she crossed the small distance between us. She leaned down, her lips brushing my cheek in a quick, warm kiss. The touch was fleeting, but her breath lingered, stirring something deep in my chest. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft, low. She didn't explain what for, but she didn't need to. I felt the weight of her words settle into me as she pulled back, her smile carrying that same fragile warmth I had only glimpsed earlier in the night. My landlady rose too, and for a moment, the two of them exchanged a look, a quiet smile that passed between friends who had shared much longer than this evening. It wasn't secretive, but it carried its own story, one I wasn't fully part of yet, but had somehow been invited into. She turned to me last. For a second, I thought she might speak, might name what had passed between us. Instead, she simply laid her hand gently on my arm. Her touch was steady, firm, but her eyes were softer than I had ever seen them. "Good night," she whispered. Just a word, but it carried a weight that reached beyond the moment. I watched them both as they moved toward the door. The friend slipped on her shoes with an easy grace, while my landlady lingered just a little longer, glancing back at me once more before following. The door clicked shut softly behind them, and then I was alone, except I wasn't. The silence they left behind wasn't empty. It was full, charged, humming with the echoes of every glance, every touch, every word that hadn't been said but had been felt. I sat back down on the couch, staring at the candle's last flicker. My chest was still tight, not with unease, but with the knowledge that tonight had been a beginning, not an ending. Whatever they had wanted to share with me, it wasn't just stories, or fears, or confessions. It was themselves, their trust, their vulnerability, their warmth. And as I sat in the dim glow, I knew one thing with quiet certainty. The bond we had touched tonight would not fade with the morning. It had only just begun.